It's the BBPTV show since 2012, where amazing guests share their digital adventures. Who will we meet today? Small biz influencer, up-and-coming trendsetter, accomplished author? You never know who'll be dropping by. And now, here's your host, Elaine Lindsay, the bionic glamourpreneur with Truel Social Media, who's the second most curious person on the planet.
Good afternoon. I'm so thrilled to be here with you today. It's just a little bit of a different show today, and I'm really thoroughly excited to be presenting Gina Gardiner. Just wait till you hear what I have to say. Gina Gardiner is a #1 international best-selling author. She's a motivational speaker, empowerment and relationship coach, and a transformational leadership trainer with well over 30 years of experience helping people experience happiness, success, and fulfillment. She's the founder of Thrive Together Tribe membership, the Enlightened Leadership program, and here's really interesting piece that we will definitely be diving into. Gina's learned to walk twice as an adult. Think about that. Now, without further ado, I want to introduce you to Gina. And hello.
Hi there, and thank you so much for inviting me to be on your show.
I'm so happy to have you here. I am really, as I would say at home, quite chuffed.
That's a very English saying.
Yeah, it really is. And see, I'm originally from Scotland, but the English sayings work too.
Yeah, I shouldn't say UK, shouldn't I? British saying.
Yes, probably more British for sure.
Yeah.
So I wanted to say that it's kind of exciting for me to meet somebody through LinkedIn, which is always a good place to be meeting really interesting people. But I just heard a little bit of your story the first time you and I spoke and thought, wow, this is not just accomplishment, but to be able to carry happiness and joy like you have, my hat's off. So I'm going to let's let you maybe start at the beginning and give people an idea of what it is you do now, what you did, and how we got here.
Okay. My work now is all about empowerment, personal development and spiritual development, and enlightened leadership, transformational leadership. You know, rather than things that have changed, because they can change back, when things transform, they're changed for good. And I have a mission which is to positively impact on 1 million people within the next 5 years through the development of enlightened leadership, which is leadership for life, whether you're leading yourself, your family, your team, your organization. It's about taking radical responsibility for your thoughts, your emotions, your actions, and your words.
Wow. I really like that. Radical. Yeah.
So I started my professional life as a teacher. And for the first time in my life, I found that I had something I was really good at and that I loved. And as soon as I started teaching, I realized that whatever else I did in life, my calling was about helping people recognize that they were better than they thought they were, that they could do things that they didn't think they could do. And so in the early days of teaching, you know, children who would say, I'm no good at maths or I can't do that, teaching them, actually, we've not found the key yet. So that's not down to you. As long as you give it your all, it's up to me to find the route to help you, and building their confidence. Now, I was promoted very quickly. I became a deputy principal at the age of 28. To the largest, I think you have junior high there.
Yes.
I think it would be junior high. in the district. Wow. And I was appointed to be the catalyst for change. So I was the youngest bar 2 on the staff. It was a good school, but very, very old-fashioned. And I worked with the then principal, John North, who was lovely. And by the February half term, I'd been there since the September. I was really pleased to go off skiing. And I was a keen skier, competent skier. But in those days, it was the fashion to have skis that were as long as possible.
Uh-huh.
And I was convinced by the people in the shop that I ought to buy skis that were 10 centimetres longer than I had been used to.
Oh.
And we went off to St. Anton in Italy, Austria rather. And I spent the first few days wrapping those 10 centimetres around each other and kept falling. And I had a bad fall on the Thursday, and the friends I was with suggested when I met them at lunchtime the next day that we go off on a new run that they'd found.
Right.
I'd been skiing on my own in the morning to get my confidence back. So off we went. It was a beautiful day, sunny, the mountains looked fabulous, the sky was blue, and we went off on the chairlift, and I followed them, and then we turned the corner, and it was pretty evident that we weren't where they thought we were supposed to be.
Oh.
And instead of this fabulous 6-kilometre red run that they'd found, we were on the top of the Schindlergratz, which is the most difficult black run in St. Anton.
Oh.
Full of moguls.
Yeah.
And these were not little cobbles. You know, I'm sure your listeners will know moguls are where the snow's been eroded. These were 6-foot monsters.
Oh my God.
And the only way to ski was to ski along the space between and then turn on a mogul and then go down. So I managed about the first third, and then I left it too long to turn, and I fell. And it took me 20 minutes to retrieve my ski and meet my friends who were further down, each of them sitting on a mogul like an elf on a mushroom. So I took my skis off and I sat and joined them. And the sun was so hot that the top of my mogul gave way. And so I fell, and there was nowhere to land. And the last thing I remember was hearing a scream. And I'm told that scream was me. And I came to, I have no idea how much long later. It took them a long time to ski to me. But the one good thing about it is that with the 2 falls and the bit of skiing I'd done, we were now almost at the bottom of the run and quite close to the village. And I was determined to ski back. So went home. My mum took me straight to accident and emergency. I'd got concussion. Took me a couple of weeks to get back to school. And 3 or 4 weeks later, I went off as the deputy leader of the borough ski trip with 150 some children, this time to Switzerland. Wow. And I was told that I could go, although I wasn't quite right, because we had a doctor with us.
Of course.
As the week went on, I became more and more like Quasimodo. And on the last evening, I had to say to my colleagues, I've got to go and lie down. And within a very few moments of lying down, I discovered I was paralysed down one side.
Oh my God.
Now, there were children outside my room. I didn't want to shout out and frighten them. So I had to wait for somebody to come and see how I was. And that wait seemed like forever. Yeah. And then all hell broke loose. I was carted off to the local hospital and then to Geneva Hospital, there several days and flown home. And it took me till the end of May to get back to school.
Wow.
And I was really pleased to get to the summer holidays. We traditionally break for the summer holidays at the end of July, and thought I've got 6 weeks now to recover and recuperate. 10 days in, very early in the morning, there was a phone call. And it was the principal's wife who was hysterical. She'd found John dead in bed. He'd had a massive heart attack. And so, far from it being a restful holiday, I helped her manage the funeral, let the staff, the parents, the local authority know, because I was acting head.
Right.
I was appointed permanent head in the January following, and I was the head of the school for 21 years. Wow. Now, during that time, by 1987, the accident was in 1983, my mobility was deteriorating, and I started to use a wheelchair around school. Didn't use it in the classrooms, the office, but it was a very spread site, and energy was in short supply.
Right.
And between 1987 and 96, I kept away from the doctors because every time they did anything, I fell apart and got worse. But 96, just before the school summer holidays, I sneezed. I was in the garden, and I felt something ping. And to cut a long story short, I'd very badly ruptured a disc, which they removed, but I had a surgical spinal syndrome, which meant that I couldn't put my left foot to the floor without fainting.
Oh my God.
And so I was wheelchair bound. Took me 18 months to walk to the bottom of my little garden, very little garden. And by the Easter, not the next year, but the following year, I could just about manage to get to the bottom of my garden. Fast forward to the end of the summer term, we had a staff do. I came home, I didn't feel very well, I was sick, felt something in my back go. I'd done this. Rushed into hospital, again, failed back surgery syndrome, and this time I couldn't stand at all. Within 4 days of coming out of hospital, I was back at school. Now, there are those that would say I was completely potty. However, I could stay at home and have daytime television or read, or I could go to school, use my faculties, and I could run my school, something that I did well, that I loved doing, that I could be useful. And so which would you choose? And it was several months later, the consultant said, well, think about you going back a couple of hours a week. I just laughed. I've been part-time for 3 weeks, and I've been back full-time since then. And for me, that's been one of my strategies for thriving, even when life is incredibly challenging, which is if you focus on what you can do, rather than focusing on what you can't do, the quality of your life is going to be really different. And it worked for me. And I was brought up by parents who, if you were fed up or you weren't very well or you were bored, they would always say, go and do something useful. Ideally, go and do something for somebody else. And it's been, again, a really powerful strategy for me. Now, the gift of all of this, and there were some very significant gifts, although I have to say there were some pretty dark days too, was I couldn't physically get into my classrooms. I couldn't get past the door because there was no room for my wheelchair. So I had to develop a way of empowering people to take radical responsibility for their own performance as teachers or other members of staff. You know, if you were the cleaner, how are you going to be the best possible cleaner and take a pride in what you're doing? If you're an office staff, how can you be the best office staff? If you're a teacher, how can you be the best teacher that you can be? And part of that was that they had a shared responsibility for the development of everyone. It was incredibly successful. The school was on the 100 best schools in England list twice during my tenure, which I'm incredibly proud of. But I'd like to think that I'd have developed that style of leadership anyway. But I'm honest enough to think I probably wouldn't, because I would have wanted to micromanage and control in a very different way. But and whilst I was a serving head, we had a terrible budget. And so one of the things that I did is I went out, and over the nearly 21 years that I was the principal, I did a whole range of other external roles, and that brought an income into school, kept the school at cutting edge. So I worked for the National College of Leadership as a trainer facilitator. I worked for the London Institute and did the same. I was an advisor for the DFES. I did a whole range of roles, not all at the same time. But what it did is it gave me a huge breadth of experience in terms of developing leaders.
Yeah.
We were also one of the first Beacon schools, and our Beacon bid was about helping other schools develop leadership too. Yeah. So I worked with dozens of schools and hundreds of teachers, helping them to incorporate the same strategies and principles that were so successful for us, and they were just as successful for them. But my health was deteriorating. And by 2004, I was given an ultimatum by my neurologist to say, if you carry on working the 14, 15 hours a day that you're doing, then you'll become housebound and you will be able to do nothing. And so in 2004, I took the very difficult decision that I was going to leave.
Yeah.
And then as I left, who was I? You know, what was my identity if I wasn't being a principal?
Yeah.
And I thought, what am I going to do with the rest of my life? I was a qualified coach. I'd got all of this wealth of experience in terms of developing leadership, and I wasn't ready for daytime television.
Oh.
It really doesn't do it for me. So I took myself off to do a research project across industries to look at what were the issues facing them in terms of leadership, from emerging to senior leadership and the development of leadership. Were they the same things that faced us in education? And of course they were, because the one common denominator is people. So I wrote my first couple of books to become my calling card. And for the first few years, I worked generally in corporates, always doing life coaching, always doing corporate coaching. And then the 2008-9 recession hit. And in a week, I lost all my contracts.
Oh, wow.
But I'd started to work for Essex University as a visiting lecturer at the business school. And they would commission me out to go and work with various companies, not big corporates, but smaller companies.
Smaller companies.
And they would keep inviting me back because they had another problem. And so in 2009, I started to work with them. I suggested, why don't I come and work with you on a regular basis, and we could avoid these problems. And so I started to work with a whole range of industries. The widgets didn't matter because, again, we're talking about strategically, how do you make the best of your people? And what I discovered is that within 9 to 10 months, those businesses became more productive, more profitable. There were better working relationships, better work-life balance for everyone. And I became more and more concerned about the quality of leadership and how many people were unhappy, how many people were on antidepressants, how many people weren't coping. And so about 2.5 years ago, I set up Genuinely You, which is an online business. And out of that, we've got a personal and spiritual development program. There is a Thriving Together tribe where you can be with like-minded people and grow and be supported and challenged. And I've just launched, very excited about the Enlightened Leadership program, which is very different because it works on the basis that in order to lead others, you've got to lead yourself first. So half the program is about developing you, the person, doing the deep dive work. You know, it's the Iron Man or Woman of leadership programs. And the research shows that most leadership programs, within 6 months, 7 to 10% of what you've learned is all that's being used. Why?
Wow.
Because you don't change the person. You give them a strategy. Life gets tricky. They go back to their old ways. So this is a 10-month program purposely designed that way, with support from the leadership facilitators, group coaching, videos, PowerPoint presentations, core reading, because it's about making fundamental transformation. So that's rather a long answer to your question. Sorry about that.
No, don't be sorry. That's absolutely wonderful. All of those things are just feeding in my head into question after question. What I have to say to our audience is the most incredible piece of meeting you is there is an underlying smile on your face the whole time. Every time I see you, every time I talk, there's this smile that's just there. You love what you do, and you're obviously incredibly good at it.
I feel very privileged to be doing something that I'm passionate about, to have I'm humbled by the fact that people allow me to work with them and help them on their journey, and watching them blossom, and very mixed metaphor. I was going to say blossom and fly. But to watch them grow and feel confident, and to be able to to deal with life and with leadership in a different way, so that, you know, when people say to me, you know, I was really going to give it up because I was fed up that, you know, my business was, it's consuming my life and I couldn't grow it, to, you know what, I'm really enjoying it, and the staff are so much happier, and our profits are up, and, you know, life is so much better. And you think,
Yes.
and even if it's an individual, and that individual, you know, goes away realizing they're not broken, that they are enough, and that they can embrace life in a different way, you know, that's worth getting up for in the morning, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I would love to have been at your school.
We did have fun. It was VE Day on Friday here.
Yes.
75 years. And my old secretary, she wouldn't like me to call her old, it was a dear friend, circulated on Facebook photographs of us in school doing VE Day.
Oh, so, lovely.
It must have been on the 50 years, which is really scary, wow. Isn't it? You know, and I'm Vera, because I like to sing, and I'm Vera Lynn. I went in as Vera Lynn. And everybody's dressed up, and we had a whale of a time. We worked hard, and the children were expected to work hard. Discipline was really good, but we played hard, everybody, and we had such fun. And, you know, when sometimes I meet ex-pupils who come and say, you know, do you remember? And that's just brilliant.
Oh, it's so lovely. I want to sort of take it one step further in all that you've done, in all that you've learned. Do you think that we've come to a different time? Like this past 5 years, what you do is becoming more, I don't want to say more important, but more open.
I think it is more important. When you look at, in the UK, over half the prescriptions in the UK are for antidepressants.
Oh, wow.
Okay. The most common form of death, forget COVID, this is before COVID, for men under 42 is suicide.
Yeah.
Something is so wrong.
Yeah.
And I believe that, you know, COVID is perhaps the universe's way of saying, I've tried to get you to listen and you haven't. And I started by giving you a poke, and then I gave you a slap, and now I've given you a monumental kick up the backside, because we've got to do something different.
Absolutely.
And I believe the answer is through leadership.
Yes.
And, you know, there's much talk about the divine feminine, and many people think that means just women. But I don't. I think it's time for compassion, care, creativity,
empathy.
It's time for us to stand up and say, if we want our children, we want to leave the world in a better place than we came into it, and we want to leave a positive legacy for our children, we have got to do things differently.
Yes.
And we can't faff about with this. There's no time. We've got to do it now. And so, you know, whilst the virus and lockdown has in a sense brought, you know, my plans in terms of getting the leadership program launched and busy, and perhaps it's going to take a bit longer, I think it's even more important that we have enlightened leadership, whether you are in a position of leadership as a business owner, if you are somebody who leads a team or an organization. Learning to be an enlightened leader gives you the capacity within your life to lead your life in a very different way, being the best of you, being able to recognize that standing in your own power, your genuine power, is not about diminishing somebody next to you.
Yes.
It's not about I'm powerful, you're weak. It is I'm powerful, and in that power, I recognize your potential. And I'm going to do what I can to help you develop your potential. And together we are stronger, and together we're going to look for who else has potential, because everybody does. How can we develop that? And so it's my view that I want to start this movement, which will become a legacy. But having said that, I believe that don't wait till you die to create a legacy, because every word you speak, every action you take or not, leaves a living legacy. It leaves it a mark, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's our choice. Do we leave a positive one, or do we leave a negative one?
Such a good point. And I think enlightened leadership, as you said, I think it has to not just start with you, but start with you and your family and those around you. It's not just about work.
No, it's leadership for life.
Yeah.
And, you know, even if you're not in a position of leadership yet, you can become an enlightened leader, because, well, that's a paradox, because we are all leaders. Yeah. I am the leader of my life. I am the common denominator I take with me every moment of every day. And I can hand my power over to somebody else. You know, how often have you heard people say, he made me angry, or she was so frustrating? If you hand the deciding factor over your emotional well-being to somebody else, you've got to put up with what they give you.
Yeah.
But if you choose to, and I choose to be happy.
Yeah.
I choose, even when days are difficult, there are things to be grateful for.
Oh, yeah.
So, you know, I call it the happiness syndrome. You know, people say, I'll be happy when I've got the perfect job, I've got the wife who doesn't nag, or the husband who's always there for me and creates great surprises. I've got children who don't need to be nagged to do their homework and clean their bedroom. The dog is well behaved at all times. I've got the perfect car, and
yeah.
So happiness is always in the future. And as soon as the criteria that we put in place are met, we put more there.
Yeah.
So happiness doesn't become a frame of mind. Now, I'm not talking about going around with a great big grin on your face and, you know, being, you know, blindly optimistic. I am talking about choosing to see the joy and wonder in the world, to see the best in people, to be grateful for plumbing that works, a nice cup of tea, a friend who gives you a ring, a great meal. And the combination of choosing to be happy every time somebody rings me, or every time I see the sunshine, or every time I have a nice cup of tea, means that my choices mean that I am happier much more of the time.
Right.
Do I have down moments? Of course I do. Do I experience negative emotions? Of course I do. But I don't stay there.
Yeah. Yeah.
And by using some of this technology, you can be in a much more positive frame of mind much more of the time. And the more you practice at it, the easier it gets.
Absolutely, because you can't be happy or joyful and angry at the same time.
No.
It doesn't work.
No.
And I think it's important, too, that people realize that when you're in the moment, try to be there.
Yeah.
I have a friend who, when her feet hit the floor every morning, she has gratitude for the fact that she's still breathing.
Yeah. I teach my clients the funky chicken. Okay.
Okay.
So you're in bed, you wake up, you waggle your elbows like a chicken.
Okay.
I can't feel my coffin. I'm alive. I choose to have a great day. What it does is it makes you smile. It's a really good way to start the day. And clients adapt it, so there's the funky penguin and the funky ostrich and the funky canary. Do your own thing, but ultimately you choose how you want to spend the day, and you can focus on lack. And many people are living in a place of real fear at the moment.
Yeah.
They're worried about money. They're worried about their job, their livelihood, their health. And if worry in and of itself made it right, I'd say worry away.
Yeah.
I'll come and worry with you. But the trouble with worry and anxieties is it leaches us of any resourcefulness. And that if we come from a place, and I call it love, people may call it something different, but we come from a place where we look at what we can do, that we recognize that even in the darkest moments, and make no mistake, there have been some pretty dark moments in my life, that the sun, even though the clouds are there, the sun is there, and tomorrow will be a new day. And that however difficult it is, it's going to pass. And for me, that's been very helpful. And I know that for many of my clients, that's been a really helpful thing to do. And the other thing is, love and gratitude are great, but forgiveness is such a powerful tool. Forgiving other people. Remember, it's not about condoning and it's not about forgetting.
No.
It's cutting the chains that keep you stuck in that past and give you the freedom to enjoy your present and your future. And I've done a lot of work with people who've been abused and who have forgiven the perpetrators of the most heinous crimes. Recognizing that holding on to the hurt does nothing to the people who have been the perpetrators.
Stop drinking the poison.
Absolutely. And looking at how we have our perspective on life becomes our reality. Change the perspective, you change the reality. So these constructs, they're not rocket science. In many ways, they're common sense. But it's amazing how rare common sense can be.
So true, so true. And I think it's important for people to understand that if you catch yourself going into blaming, well, he made me or she did this or what have you, when you learn to catch yourself and take away that emotion and instead be grateful for something, it can be something as little as there were lots of birds on my deck this morning. That thrills me.
I don't think that's simple at all. I think nature's wonderful.
Oh, I just absolutely love it. I was out there with birdseed and peanuts for the blue jays, and for me, that's an absolute joy. And I can ride that wave of joy for the next however long until I hit my next great moment.
I think, and if you collect those gratitudes during the day, and just before you go to sleep, scan the day and choose 5. It's a great way of recalibrating the brain. But just to go back for a moment, you were talking about, the people who play the blame game. And one of the things I would say is that 95% of how we think is habitual. It doesn't cross our conscious mind. It's in the part of the brain that deals with your nails growing and your breathing. It just happens automatically. And the problem with that is you'll say something and it's usually the tone of voice, not actually the words. And that will trigger me into an old place of where perhaps my parent was critical or a teacher was unkind. And it doesn't cross my conscious brain to think, was that the motive? Or, what's really going on here? I then immediately go into my habitual way of being, which triggers you, which triggers me, which triggers you. Before you know where you are, you've got a full-scale row.
And you've turned it into this big story.
And if you're going to be writing stories, why on earth wouldn't you write yourself the part of the hero? And, if you're in victim mode, blaming everybody else, then you have no resources available to you. But I think, the more you're able to use this, I call it technology, but these principles and these strategies, the better your life and the life of those around you, the quality of life is so much better. So these are very much along the personal side of the development of an enlightened leader. And of course we do lots of the strategies in terms of leader, in terms of strategic direction and vision and all of those things, but with a slightly perhaps different take on them. But ultimately coming from that place of inner strength and recognizing you're not broken. And I think, we all self-limit. I'd like to share a story with you, if I may. And
Please.
for me, it was a pivotal moment in my life. I've left school as a principal. It's 2004. And I decided that I was going to go and study neuro-linguistic programming, something I'd wanted to do, but I couldn't take the time off school to do the course that I wanted to do. And I didn't want to do an itsy-bitsy course. I wanted to do a course that really studied it well. And so in 2005-06, I did my practitioner, my master practitioner, and also did NLP coaching with the same organisation. And so I decided that I wanted to go and see NLP used in as many contexts as possible. And so I went to see all sorts of people, and some of them were great, and some of them were grim, and some of them were in between. And I ended up at the Excel Centre, which is a big conference centre in London, going to see Tony Robbins, which many of your viewers and listeners will be familiar with. Now, I have to admit, I went very cynically. I thought, huge man, huge ego. I reckon it's all going to be hype and that it will all dissipate within days of being there. How wrong could I be? There were 10,000 people on the course. That in itself was gobsmacking.
Yeah.
And on the first morning, he started to talk about a program he was doing in California. And I thought, well, I'd like to do that. But I immediately dismissed it because I didn't have an electric travel chair in those days. I'd not traveled on my own without somebody, being my minder, if you like. Just dismissed it. Now, on the end of the first day, we did a fire walk. Now, for those who don't know what a fire walk is, you walk over hot coals in bare feet, and if you're in the right mindset, you don't get burned. Now, in 2004, I had an internal spinal stimulator fitted. It was brand new science, and it's like an internal TENS machine.
Yeah.
So by this time, 2006, I could probably walk 5 or 6 steps unaided. It's very slow progress. But I was determined to do the firewalk. So with somebody each side supporting me, I did the firewalk, and I was absolutely thrilled, tickled pink. And as I sat back down in my wheelchair, great sense of achievement. The guy behind me was a double amputee, no legs below the knee. He tipped himself up onto his hands and he walked across those hot coals on his hands. I have no idea who he is, but I'm so grateful because in that moment, I thought, if he can do that, I can go to America. I booked my flight, my ticket that night. 6 weeks later, I was in California doing Date with Destiny. I then went and did all of his courses, most of which were in America. I became a senior leader. I've since traveled the world speaking, working, and for pleasure. And I owe it to that man. Because in that moment, even though I traveled the country and people were often telling me, aren't you amazing, running your school from a wheelchair and all of that rubbish, what I realized was I was self-limiting. And my challenge to anybody who's listening to this is, how are you self-limiting? What are the things that you're fearful of, that you're not going to try? Because if your mindset is, I'll fail, it's a done deal. If your mindset is, I'm fearful I might fail, you're going to make very different decisions to, I'm going to do this. I'm going to succeed. Don't know how, but I'm going to do it. And in that moment, that man taught me a lesson that has been a huge influence on my life since. And because I speak of him, I know from the feedback that I've got that he's been a huge influence on other people's lives.
Yeah.
And so you never know, do you, who you're going to meet and what difference they're going to make in your life.
Wow.
And I would say to you, if you've got limiting beliefs are something that were created early in your life and they don't have to stay. You can create more empowering beliefs. If you believe you can't, done deal. But ultimately, okay, I'm never going to be a ballet dancer. The chances are I'm never going to be a marathon runner. I still use the wheelchair if I'm going into town or travel. But my life opened up because that man taught me such a powerful lesson. And I hope that people that are watching and listening this to this will take that lesson on board without having to do the firework.
Absolutely. And it's as simple as this. Babies take their first steps and they fall down.
A lot.
Which one, okay, is babies don't just lie there. They get up and do it again and again and again. If we didn't keep trying, nobody'd walk.
No. Moreover, have you ever known a baby that says, does my bum look big in this nappy? And do I look silly? I'm not going to do this because what will people think of me? They might laugh at me.
They actually really enjoy being laughed with.
But ultimately, there's a sea change. And so many people start to believe that they're not enough. They're not pretty enough. They're not good enough, clever enough, rich enough, tall enough, whatever enough. And I think it's so important that we challenge those beliefs.
Absolutely. You just absolutely filled my head. I know that the audience, I'm sure, feels absolutely the same. It's empowering listening to you. And I can't help but smile because you just emanate joy. And I don't mean in a, airy-fairy kind of way. It's very grounded. You're incredibly well spoken, and it just it's a wonderful feeling. I just have to say thank you before I say anything else, because just getting to hear your story, I think, is incredibly empowering.
Thank you for that. It's just what I do, and I've got this one life, and I'm going to make, so far as I know, and I'm going to make the most of it.
I love that attitude. Make the most of it should be your hashtag. So I could probably keep you all day because I would love to listen to you. I know that our audience is used to, at the end of a show, I always ask my guest for you to leave something with the audience, something they can apply in their daily life, personal or business, some little thing that you do every day.
I think probably the most powerful thing that I do every day is to collect gratitudes. That from the moment I wake up, I am consciously seeking things that I can notice to be grateful for. They're not big, they're little. And they've got power at a number of levels. And the first is you can't be grateful if you're not in the moment.
Yes.
And I think too much we spend time worrying about what we should have done or shouldn't have done in the past, or being anxious about what might happen or never happen in the future. And I lead a very busy life. So for me, being grounded and being in the moment is really important. And it becomes a way of life.
Yeah.
So even at 4:30, when my cat Leo, now it's summer, wakes me up because he wants to go out, I am not grateful for the waking up, but I am grateful to have him in my life, and grateful that I can go back to bed and have another couple of hours sleep before I get up. And it's just little things, chance conversations, a great cup of tea. The natural world for me is a huge, rich source of gratitudes. And I think the other thing I'd like to leave with you, the research that's been done that says that when things go wrong, we tell on average 37 other people. And when things go right, we tell on average 5.
Oh, that's gone up. Okay. Yeah.
How about if we swapped it round?
Yeah.
And that we noticed and that we thanked people. Do I find there's been some, the virus is dreadful, and I'm not making light of it, but there's been some amazing things that have come out of it, particularly the level of kindness and consideration, the level of people going out of their way to consider other people has been just humbling. And 8 weeks ago, if you weren't a celebrity, even if the only reason you were famous is because you could eat worms in the jungle, if you weren't a famous sportsman, you were really a second-class citizen. You weren't noticed. And for the first time in my life, if you're a porter or a cook in a hospital, a nurse or a doctor, a dustbin man, keeping us sorted, the postman are getting the recognition that they finally deserve.
Yeah.
And I am really hopeful that the level of kindness and consideration and recognizing true value, let's get rid of our junk values and let's look at what's really important. And that's relationships and people and how we treat one another. And I'm hopeful that as the virus we begin to come out of lockdown, I do hope we've learnt the lesson and that we go forward in a very different way. And that's up to each one of us, isn't it?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We have to make that choice.
Yeah.
And more than once.
Yeah. Ongoing.
We have to continue to choose.
Yes.
To take the high road.
Yeah. And actually, once you start that route, you find it's amazing.
Yeah.
That your quality of life and the quality of your relationships with yourself and with others just becomes very different.
It's so true. And my spiritual advisor a number of years ago said, it's incredibly exhilarating when you work on yourself and really work hard to improve. It's amazing how much everyone around you seems to step up to.
I think that's really true. But I think it can be a really challenging journey. And what I would say to you don't have to do it on your own. Reach out.
Yes.
Come and join us in the Thrive Tribe. Come and find somebody that you trust and who has your best interest at heart, who expects the best of you and will support you to get there. Because
absolutely,
we all need a helping hand, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely. We cannot do this alone. None of us can do this alone. And on that note, I want to say thank you so much, Gina Gardiner. As per usual, you'll be able to get all of the information on Gina, where you can reach out to her on social and her websites on the BBP TV show page. And with that in mind, I want to say thank you ever so much for coming on the show. I'm sure we'll have you back if you don't mind coming back, that is.
It's been my absolute pleasure, and I'd love to come back anytime you'll have me. Thank you very much.
Excellent. So I want to say, be sure and make the best of your today, every day, and we will see you next time.
By BBP TV Show and True Social, helping small biz navigate the digital world.
Thank you so much.